Hi, I'm Kathryn Lopez from the National Review Institute, and I am so grateful to be able to welcome Robert Nicholson from the Philos Project for a conversation on the Coptic martyrs who, I believe it was 8 years ago, around this time, it was February 15th, 2015, where 21 Coptic Christians and one Muslim, right, were beheaded in Libya. And then they were officially made martyrs in the Coptic Orthodox Church on the 21st of February of that year. And so these are kind of the days of commemoration. And the Philos Project has a really fascinating, beautiful project that they're working on involving the Coptic martyrs, which is part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you, Robert. First, because they're such beacons of faith and religious freedom, and obviously martyrs of religious freedom. Can you talk a little bit about these 21 men and why it's important for us to know them and commemorate them? And then we have to talk about their also amazing families.
Yes. Well, first of all, Kathryn, thanks so much for doing this and focusing some attention on these martyrs, on their families, and on the whole cause of Christians of the Near East. It's central to what we do at Philos, and it's great to have as many people in the conversation as possible. These men, as you said, 20 of them were born Christians. One of them was not, a man from Chad. What's interesting about these martyrs is that they were, the day before they were captured by ISIS, probably the least likely people in the world to be martyrs. They were not out looking to suffer and die for their faith. They were guest workers. I've been to their hometown. One of the things that people don't know is that Coptic Christians, in particular among Christians of the region, tend to be more affected by poverty than Christians, say, of Lebanon or of Syria, who historically have tended to be more in at least the middle or even the upper reaches of society. Egypt has many more Christians, and so proportionately there are many more that are at the lower end. And these people are very much on the lower end. And sometimes people ask me, how did these Christians from Egypt get to Libya anyway, right, where they were beheaded? And the reason is that they were guest workers, right? Not unlike the guest workers we have in this country or you see in other countries, right? It's an interesting fact. The part of Egypt they're from, El province, which is kind of almost in the middle, south of Cairo, is the closest part of Egyptian settlement next to the Libyan border. And so these people would go over to Libya to work in industry, right? Regular guys. And they, in the course of their work, were found by, an ISIS cell in Libya, taken to the beach. And as you said, the rest is history. They were very plain people, very humble people, but very faithful people. And if you see the images, and I've never watched any of the video, thank God, I don't think I could deal with it. I don't watch those things. Yeah. But if you look at the photos, the still photos, one of the things that is striking is that most of them have what I would say, under the circumstances, is an extremely serene look on their face. I mean, the strength and the courage that they displayed, even at that moment, like kneeling on the ground, about to be killed, beheaded even for their faith, is remarkable. So much so that this guy, I believe his name was Matthew Ayatagira or something like that. I'm probably mispronouncing that. This man from Chad was, as you mentioned, not a Christian. And yet when ISIS came to him and said, okay, buddy, renounce this faith or you die, he said, my God is their God. And so impressed by their courage and their devotion, went with them. I mean, completely voluntarily. It's incredible to me to think about that guy. Like, why would he go through with that? What he saw in his fellow men, his fellow workers, must have been so overwhelming that he was, he counted it joy, as the scriptures say, to be counted among the martyrs. It's just an incredible story.
It really is. And obviously most of us aren't going to be called to something like that, but that's what scripture tells us we should be doing in our entire lives, right?
Yes.
Christians should be witnesses, and people should be looking and saying, I want what he has, right?
That's right.
And this is kind of an extreme example of that. And it really is remarkable. Like you, I've never watched the actual video, but yeah, have been so found it so remarkable what peace there seems to be.
Right.
I think of somebody like a church father like Ignatius of Antioch, who told his people, if there's an opportunity to free me, no, I this is my call. I need to die for Christ who died for me.
That's right.
I can't ever imagine myself getting there, but I do remember interviewing a priest from Iraq, Father Douglas Bazi, who was it was pre-ISIS. He was kidnapped by Islamic radicals, and they were asking him to renounce his faith. They were asking him all these questions, devouring where people were and all this stuff, and they were burning cigars on his back and knocking out his teeth and all these things. And I said, you must have been such a holy person that you could withstand that. And he said, I was just a regular priest, just trying my best, and God gives you the grace. It's really remarkable. And these Coptic martyrs certainly witness to that. And then their families. Robert, talk about their families.
Well, I am very privileged in having met many, if not most, of their family members, but it happened very randomly. So I led a small delegation of Christian leaders, in fact, Catholic leaders, to Egypt in 2019 on a fact-finding mission, solely focused on understanding the Christians of Egypt, and the challenges they face, obviously with an eye toward thinking about what we in the US and in the West can do. And it was an amazing trip. We were in Cairo, we went down to Armenia, we met with the Coptic Orthodox community, bishops on down. We met with the Coptic Catholic community, from the Coptic Catholic Patriarch to the people in the pews. Saw government leaders, saw holy sites, monasteries. Amazing trip, even by Philos standards. But at one point in the trip, I turned to our guide, a very fine, big-hearted guy named Wagi, Coptic Christian, Orthodox Christian. And I said to him, we're in Armenia. I know that these 21 martyrs, or 20 of them, were from this area. Is there any chance that we can meet one of the family members? And Wagi, being the great guy that he is, said, let me make some phone calls. And he did, and told me later that day, I got some of them. We're going to meet them, I think, the next day, tomorrow. The next day was a crazy day, as these trips go. Things got pushed back. We ended up showing up late. We came to the church that was built by President Sisi in memorial to these martyrs, and found it to be one of the most biggest, beautiful churches I've seen in the region. Really focused in a big way on these people, on their lives. They have these kind of little I don't know how to say, like, not shrines, but little kind of like exhibits almost of their personal effects, some of which were on them at the time they were captured and killed. Little items of clothing, and I mean, just really made it real for me to see just random things, but in the context of where we were standing, things that meant a lot. And here we come in the church. We're late. We're kind of getting off the bus, discombobulated. We walk into the church, and it's this huge church. And we see that all the way up in the front, the first 3 or 4 rows are full of people, like dozens of people, at least 100 people. And, men on one side, women on the other. And, I'm kind of taken aback, and I turn to Wagi and I say, are they all family members? And he says, yes, they're all family members. They all, the word spread, they heard that people were coming, and they wanted to meet you. Apparently, and I was shocked to find this out, not very many people have gone out to meet them. They're not in communication with people. And when I did meet them, I walked up to the front of this church. I realized these are very humble people. I mean, it's like the guy came in from the shop with his overalls on, covered in grease, farmers, their fingernails dirty. I mean, they're coming in from a long day out in the fields, and they're waiting very quietly, very, very still. And I was like immediately overwhelmed,
Wow.
as were all the people with me. To make this long story short, we went up to the front. We had a priest with us. He was an Egyptian Catholic based in Rome. He was kind of our chaplain, somewhat of a guide. He got up, said some words to them in Arabic. He then said to me, "Come on up here and you say a few words, like introduce yourself. I'll interpret." I couldn't speak. I mean, I'm looking at these people, their faces so, I don't know, beautiful in that moment, and just knowing what they must have gone through. And like in my mind, all these stories are playing out. And I'm not an emotional person, Kathryn, but I literally could not speak. So I gave the microphone back, and instead we broke up into groups, got a few different people to interpret. And we, this small group and I, spread out and just started talking to these people and asking them, like, tell us about your son, about your brother, about your husband. And you have little kids, little like small kids who were the sons and daughters of these men. And the craziest part about this whole experience was that these people were so thankful to us. They were so grateful, and they kept saying it. And when we all kind of reconvened on the bus later that night, we found out that all of the people in all of the groups were saying, "Thank you so much for coming. It's so important about, my son's story or my husband's story. And we're just happy that people care and they remember him." And, we were like, it was one of the most surreal and powerful experiences that I've ever had. And in the middle of all of this, the Wagi, our guide, comes over to me, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, the priest wants to have a word with you." And I said, "Sure." And I'm thinking, maybe it's a, donation for the church or something, which of course we were happy to make and ended up making. But he had a very different request, one that I did not expect. And he says, all of these people have one shared dream. And their dream is to go to Jerusalem, to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, see the place where Christ died and was resurrected. And my question to you is that something that you could make possible? Now, I have never met this priest before. I have no frame of reference for him or how he would know me, the Philos Project, what I do for a living. But it turns out that is actually something that's very much in my wheelhouse. And so, I blurted out in that, within a second, "Well, yes, are you kidding me? I would love to. It'd be my honor to do that." Now, in that moment, I wasn't thinking about, raising the money and the logistics and the visas and the buses, but whatever, it didn't matter. I said, "Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yes, I will pledge to you right now. I will make this happen." And we left, and we all got on the bus. I told them everybody about it. Everybody got really, really excited. And then COVID hit. This was October 2019. Everything ground to a halt. And it's only recently that we've come back and been communicating with the priest and the people and telling them, okay, like, we're going to make good on this. We're going to make this happen, God willing. And been so grateful to have a lot of other people catch the vision and say, wow, this is something that we should be doing to help these people.
So right now, that's what you're doing. You have a campaign going to get these beautiful people to the Holy Land.
That's right.
And how can people help?
Well, people can help by giving. It's really as simple as that. We are trying to take 100 people, which sounds like a big number, but these are big families, and they're 20 guys. We are trying to find the 21st, the family of the 21st in Chad. That's sort of a side project. I would love to see that happen.
It's crazy to me that people aren't pounding down their doors, getting to know them. And yeah, wow.
There have been, to the credit of, I'm forgetting his name, Martin, forgetting his name now, starts with an M, his last name. He wrote a great book called the 21, I think.
Right.
There's been some good media about it. People.
Beautiful icon.
Beautiful icon. That's right. And that actually, if you go to the church, you'd see that. It's a huge,
really?
thing on the wall. Yes, it's beautiful. But you're right. It's kind of, the world, a lot has happened since 2015. The world's moved on. Even Christians just kind of forget that these people exist. So my hope is that, this serves a dual purpose in, number one, helping these people achieve their dream, and indirectly really sending a message of hope to other Christians around the region, right? Things have not gotten a whole lot better since then for Christians in Egypt or elsewhere. And a campaign like this, while different from others in that it's not really about, giving them money or trying to advocate for them to leave or to have better policies. This is like a spiritual mission, right? This is trying to speak to that dimension of the problem in the region. It is, from my perspective, a spiritual war of sorts, and I think that such a war should be fought with spiritual weapons, right? And what better answer to martyrdom than to go to the place of the resurrection? I mean, that's the story, right? That's why Christians there and elsewhere can't lose hope, right? Where we cannot be hopeless people. And that's why you meet, I'm sure, people you've met in Iraq or Lebanon, people who've suffered similar things. They cling to it. I was just in Armenia and I said, Armenians, guys, you guys, it's not like the latest, violence and oppression is the first time that these things have happened to you. Like, how do you guys stay hopeful after centuries of so much, trauma? And the answer is Christianity. That's just like, that is part of this faith, right? We cannot be hopeless people. We are, in some sense, even in the midst of extreme adversity, optimists, right? Because we know how the story ends. And so we thought this is just the perfect thing to do to send that message. And then, of course, the second thing is for us, for people not living in that situation, right? And although things may be more difficult for us, living comparatively in the lap of luxury, to kind of go back to that place, right? To connect with that suffering, as you said at the outset. I mean, that is very core to our faith, right? And it's not something we should run from. It's something we should try to link up with, right? And I think that there's something about this whole process for Christians in the U.S., Christians in the West, to remember, like, what is this all about, right? And actually, it's healing for us in some ways, I think,
Right.
even more than it is for them. So I would hope that people out there, find it like a real privilege and honor to participate in this. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to spread the word, trying to get these people funded. That's the goal.
Well, and these families are so amazing, because I remember in the days after the murders, the martyrdom, interviews with fathers and brothers and mothers and wives, where I smiled when you said gratitude. I remember, I think it was one brother of one of the 21 who was so grateful that they didn't edit the video, and where his brother talked about Jesus Christ. ISIS left Jesus Christ in the video. And so there was that witness that people were seeing. I mean, imagine being grateful for that.
Wow.
Or to forgive immediately, forgive someone who beheaded your loved one.
That's incredible.
Yeah, their witness is just incredible. Their response to this terrorism was pure love. I remember interviewing a bishop from Iraq again, who a Chaldean bishop, who talked about how ISIS came through and asked everyone to recant or be killed or flee. And he said not one person hesitated to just leave, because they weren't going to say no to Christ. And I said to him, all right, come on. Like, one guy said to you,
there's got to be one guy.
I can't do this. This is too, it doesn't matter if I pretend. He started crying and he said, not one of them. It's just incredible.
I've never heard of one of them. I had one specific example. 7 or 13, and I was there with a translator and talked to these two older women, very, very old women who had gone through that same exact experience. They may have been with your friend even when these things were happening. And I remember exactly that. I said something like, did you ever think about, even for a moment, well, like maybe God will understand.
Yeah,
Maybe
God
I
knows
can,
my heart.
yeah, God knows my heart. Like, and they looked at me with this horrified look, just like not even horror, baffled, like, no, well, of course I wouldn't think about that. No, not even for a second. And you put yourself in that situation. You're like, I'd like to think that I would do that, but I don't know. I mean, can you imagine with ICE? I mean, you know what these people are capable
Right,
of. You know what they could do, not only to you, but to your family members, and
right.
still to hold the line. I mean, I think what's needed in the U.S., what's needed in the West is spiritual revival, right? There are a lot of things that need to be done in society and politics, but ultimately, it's a problem of the heart. And I think that if there's any way to stimulate that revival, one way for sure is for us in the West to reconnect with our brothers and sisters in the Near East and get some of that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right, right.
just like stew in what they have, right? Hear these stories. I mean, it puts everything in perspective. And I think for me anyway, it makes you feel really small. Like, what am I doing? I have all of this liberty. Like, am I even using it? Am I faithful with all that I have? It's very, for me, all of these engagements that I do in my work, thank God I'm able to do them. It's part of my own kind of spiritual formation. I have to be honest. I mean, I'm helping people, but I'm being helped just as much in return.
Yeah, I'm always struck when people say, "Oh, it's so good of you to cover the persecuted." No, it's selfish,
Right.
because
Yeah,
this is real Christianity.
that's right.
And Robert, at the Philos Project, we're talking a lot about Christianity, but a big part of what you do is ecumenical too, to make sure we understand each other. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what Philos actually is?
Yeah, so the mission of the Philos Project is to promote positive Christian engagement in the Near East. Started in 2014. I founded it because I believed that there is more that we as Christians can do and should do in terms of engaging with this part of the world. Now, this is after a decade plus of the war on terror and the invasion of Iraq, right? For most people, this region just means death, destruction, leave it alone, forget about it. And my belief then and now is that this is the the hinge of the world. This is where three continents come together. This is where history comes together. This is where the three big monotheistic religions come together. Whether we like it or not, what happens here affects the world. And of course, as a Christian, this is my birthplace to some
Mhm.
extent, right? I understand myself best by dialoguing with the place from which I came, right? All the things I think about the world, all my values, they come from here. And of course, as we're saying, there are people who share those values there today, right? So what's my obligation to them? What am I doing to help them? Christians, different kinds of Christians, also Christians and non-Christians, right? So I find what's one of the interesting things about my work is that some of the hardest work is actually the ecumenical work. It's actually not the Christian Jewish work or the Jewish Muslim. It's Christian on Christian, and
Mm.
it's in things in the Near East can be could are even worse in many ways than they are here in terms of that. We like to fight here in the West, but over there, some of these fights have been going on since the 5th century. The Council of Ephesus or Chalcedon. Like these are old quarrels.
And
But
they
what?
happen like in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah, well, that's true too, right? Yes, interesting backdrop. But you know, I do find that in the next generation, and also in light of just all of the stuff that's happened, the upside is that people start to come together, right? And it's not that we all have to be the same or give up traditions that mean things to us or liturgies that go back to the beginning, but it does mean that we share a lot more than we don't share. And what I always remind people is that you and that guy or you and that girl may look at each other, fellow Christians from different rites, and say, oh, this, what do we have in common? This is, somebody else. But I guarantee you, the people who want to kill you understand very well what links you both together. Like the enemy, so to speak, sees what we share more than we do sometimes, right? You look at some of the intellectual fathers of some of these movements, right? Sayyid Qutb, a very famous Islamist thinker, he knew exactly what Christians share with other Christians, and even Christians and Jews, right? We look at each other, we don't see it, but in reaction to some of the attacks that we face, I think people are starting to, right? And so there's progress, even in the what, eight years that we've been doing Philos, with this work. I think a lot more needs to be done. I do think that the changing world situation, some of the crises we've faced, even in recent years with COVID, also some of the big conflicts that are breaking out, are forcing people back on spirituality, right? So even as you see decline in the younger generation and church attendance and all of that, you also see in parallel a little bit of a resurgence in certain sectors. And so I do it for that reason, right? Because I do believe that there is something powerful beyond the political map. There's something deeper that we're all tapping into when we're in this part of the world, when we're in Jerusalem and we're talking about the God who revealed himself there, right? It's really about him. And I think to the extent that we can take our focus off of each other in all of our small differences and focus it on the God who made us and the God who gave us his word and the God who sent Jesus Christ, the more we're going to be on the right track. So that's a big part of it, is just shifting the frame, right? From horizontal to vertical. A lot is accomplished right there.
I do remember the first time I went to a Chaldean Mass, and it's the same Mass but different,
Right.
as a Roman right Mass, Catholic Mass, and the Our Father in Aramaic. Even the
Yes.
men were crying. It's just
Oh yeah.
so beautiful to be able to share those different traditions in the same faith. And what's striking too to me, particularly, I think I really realized this during the height of ISIS, how many Americans have no idea that there are so many Christians in Iraq and Syria, and maybe they know there are some in the Holy Land, at least like at the churches, but that there's this robust leaven in that part of the world, and needs to be, is often
Very few.
unknown.
Unknown. And I get a lot of people saying to me over the years, Christians should need to do more, they're not doing enough. And I agree with that. But I always tell them that. I say the first step is we just have to let people know they exist. And in a certain way, it's easy to blame the dumb American Christian who's not paying attention and doesn't seem to care. And there are some of those people. But in some ways, you can't blame a guy living in Indiana for not knowing about the people living 7,000 miles away, by the Euphrates River. I mean, he's never been there. He doesn't speak the language. Why would he know that? I mean, he's busy trying to make a living. So, assuming the best, but nevertheless saying the ignorance is unacceptable, and that if we are one body of Christ, it's good if the right hand knows not only what the left hand is doing, but that the left hand exists.
Yes, right.
So that overcoming that learning curve is actually quite a bit of what we do. There is that moment like, there's Christians in Iraq. How'd they get there?
Yeah,
What?
right.
When
Well,
did
then
they
what's so
show up?
remarkable is how grateful the Iraqis are when the Iraqi Christians are, that you are acknowledging they exist, even though we made their lives worse, right?
Yeah,
Which is a whole
a
nother
hard thing. That's a hard thing to hear, but you're right. That is a whole other story. But we do have some special obligation, I think, in the case of Iraq in particular, for our engagement there over the last 20 years, definitely.
Yeah, and I again, a whole nother conversation, but it's remarkable what they've been able to do in the Archdiocese of Erbil, resettling people and opening a Catholic university and hospital and all of these things. There really is. I mean, that's another testament to hope. They could have given up and all left.
Definitely.
But
Definitely.
they can't. And they know they can't.
Yeah.
By the way, the book that you were referring to is by Martin Mossback, The 21 Journey into the Land of the Coptic Martyrs.
There you go. Great book. Highly recommend.
Yeah,
highly recommend.
Beautiful. He did a beautiful job. And what you said about our connection, I often think when I go to St. Patrick's Cathedral, it's not the same as going to a Coptic church on Sunday in Egypt, but we have counterterrorism police by the confessional, I mean,
Right.
there is a similar but different threat. And we are the same people. I mean, when the Coptic martyrs were beheaded, they talked about the people of the cross, that's
Yes.
you and me. That's not just the Coptic martyrs. And so there is this responsibility we have to know that and be in solidarity and in prayer and whatever other ways that we can be. And this.
And I should say, Kathryn, just on that, I want to commend you because, you just as one person, I think are a great example of someone who's used the things at your disposal, in your case, the power of the pen, to do just that. I mean, what you've been doing over the past years, I mean, without, any special recognition or anybody urging you to do it is, I mean, I just want to say, I really appreciate all what you write, but I mean, you've done such a great job covering these communities over the years that, you, I think, deserve a special mention. It's notable, and I would love to see other people, obviously just different people in different contexts using what they have, it may be something small, but offering it up in the name of these people who've been carrying on the faith for all these centuries. So anyway, thanks for what you do.
But Robert, as I do, once you can't look away. And every little thing, is just, it's answering the call that we're all supposed to be paying attention to and being diligent to and obedient to. I want to go back to these remarkable people, the martyrs, who you can't take to the Holy Lands, but they're in a better place, and their families. So you've got this campaign going on in these particular days. We're trying to focus people's attention on the story, on the witness, again, of both the martyrs and their families, who are icons of forgiveness and love and joy in the midst of, these are examples of people. Pope Francis talks about, like, your grandmother who no one will ever know who's a saint. There's so many people who never will make a headline, but these people have made headlines because of what happened to their loved ones. What more should we know about them, and why should we help them get to the Holy Land? Why is going to the Holy Land so important?
Well, there's, I think, several layers here. I think the first one is the one that I said, it's their dream. The second one I've also said, which is that it, I think, sends a very important and much needed signal to Christians in other parts of the region, as far as what's what and what's possible and where their strength comes from. Also, that they have friends, right? There are people out there in the world, in a place like the United States, who haven't forgotten them, and in fact are, like, putting their money where their mouth is, quite literally, to help these Christians, attain a dream that they've had for so long. I think that, for my time in the region, I'm there often, talking to people all the time. The biggest problem right now is hopelessness. And I'm even in a place like Lebanon, which was a historic bastion of Christianity, hopelessness, despair, a feeling that this is never going to get fixed. And on the contrary, it's getting worse. We're going to have to leave. We're going to lose not only our family's, estate here or home, we're going to lose the presence of Christians in this country, or whichever country. And I think that, at the level of the heart, there are things that need to be done that are not always the most intuitive, right? The first thing you think about helping these Christians is to send them money, or to get them out, or to go to Washington to get the government to pressure their government to do. And we do all that stuff. That's all stuff that we do and have been doing. But this, I think, is actually probably better calibrated to speak to the need of the people right now, today. And that's what we want to do it. I mean, and who better to do it? The other thing I would say, the third reason, is that these people, inadvertently, the martyrs and their families, are themselves a kind of bridge that is really yet to be walked on. Here's the thing: the government of Egypt has honored these people and continues to honor them. And we're in communication with the Egyptian embassy about this trip, and there is, a lot of support for making this happen. We've put in some pretty big requests as far as the logistical help and visa help and all that, and they're working on it. And so here, you see an opportunity for not only Christian engagement, but Christian witness to the Islamic world, right? They're going to also be going into Israel, so to the Jewish world to some extent, right? So there's this huge, like kind of unlocked power in the story of these martyrs that can be leveraged for things even beyond their own families and even the Christian world in the region, right? So it's like, how can we unlock that power? How can we make the most of this legacy, right? We owe it to these people to make sure that they did not die in vain, right? Even beyond the rewards they'll have in heaven. And so that for us is really important as well. Really kind of getting all of these layers at the same time and thinking creatively about what can be done for Christians, even as we work on some of the other more traditional efforts.
Well, you talked earlier about the spiritual, and I think it also witnesses, a pilgrimage to the Holy Land witnesses to not only our connection and our roots, but the power of prayer. That's what you do when you go there, right? And we live in a culture that's suspicious of prayer. Thoughts and prayers don't really mean anything, the media often says. And I remember
From
after
one congressman recently.
Correct. I remember after one school shooting, the New York Daily News saying thoughts and prayers, God's clearly not listening, which is, a little bold, but also portrays, this not actually understanding what prayer is. And so I'm so grateful that you're doing this. Where do people go to make a donation?
Yes, philosproject.org/21 martyrs. I'm going to check that as we're sitting here to make sure that that is correct. I've been known to give.
And I just love this icon so much. If
It
people
is great. It is really great.
The martyrs are depicted as other Jesuses, and then there's the one man who looks different because he wasn't Christian, but may have been by desire at the end of his life.
Yeah, you have to think that. Yes, I was correct. It's /21 martyrs. And the cost of bringing a person is $3,000. So people who have the means, that's not everyone, but people who have the means and want to sponsor an actual human being to go, would love to see that. But of course, any gift of any amount is going to get this over the hump, and a lot of the gifts that are coming in, they're $10, $20, $50, all of that makes a huge difference. And we're seeing this grow. And I should say, just for people who are considering giving, 100%, every penny of every dollar goes exactly to this campaign. It doesn't get lost in personnel or, copy paper. This is all about the campaign. So anything you give is actually going to help a member of one of these families to go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So you can rest assured that that's the case.
Well, I did make a small donation, and I thought, $100 is basically a dinner in New York City at this point, and so we can spare a dinner, to contribute to these remarkable people going to the Holy Land, something that they would never be able to do on their own, and something, as you said, we owe to them. And their martyrs, beloved martyrs who died for the Christian faith and for God, for God. I think this can, obviously Jesus Christ is God, but for those who do not believe in the Trinity, right? We're talking about the God who unites us as well. And so this doesn't need to just be a Christian campaign, but if you're Christian, really please do consider, because I do believe we owe it to these people. Robert Nicholson, the Philos Project, thank you for the work that you do. I can testify, one of your colleagues asked me when we first met, or when I first became aware of the Philos Project, and it was on Capitol Hill. I don't know if I was moderating the panel or I was a panelist, but you go to Capitol Hill too. I
do more than I would like, but yes, we do that too. Yes, well, that's where we met. You're right. That was about ISIS, right?
That may have been at the beginning of Philos.
We were 2014 was, we have the weird distinction of being born kind of the same time as ISIS, maybe providential, I don't know, but that meant that the first couple of years of Philos, there was a lot of work in Iraq and in Syria and that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. that's how we ended up being connected.
Well, I remember that day too, just one quick story before we go, silly little thing, but I guess I got there early or something. So as I was waiting by the security on whatever Capitol Hill building we were in, it was on the Senate side. And I noticed all these people taking rosaries out of their pocket. And it wasn't just people at our event. It was just people going to work and stuff. And I asked one of the Capitol Hill police officers, and he says, "Oh, all the time." And, you don't think of Capitol Hill as a particularly holy or pious place. But, it's, I was thinking when you were talking about fabrics from the Coptic martyrs and things in the church, at the museum in New York for the 9/11 attacks, there are so many holy cards that were in desks. And, it's like, even though we don't feel like a very holy or pious culture, we're still connected. We're still
Yes, we are.
And so thank you for the work that you do that helps us remember who we are.
Kathryn, thank you so much. Likewise, all that you're doing is really important, and I'm just so grateful to be here and really to issue. I mean, to me, it's exciting, and I hope people feel the excitement and want to join us. So really, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, and if you're on Twitter, please follow Robert Nicholson. He's always pointing out important news stories that may not otherwise get a lot of attention. The Philos Project again, and I thank you on behalf of National Review Institute for spending time with us today. And please share this video and share the link to the campaign for the Coptic martyrs. And most importantly, share their story, because they should not be forgotten. And these days in particular are good days to share the witness of the 21. Thank you.